in case you have the impression that I try to shoehorn two topics into one talk, then this impression may be right. Basically, the motivation was just to demonstrate a little bit what I've been working on in the last year, and these are two topics that are quite, of course, they are both challenges to the industry in ROS, but what is not? And these two topics are basically licensing and deliberation. So maybe I can again say a little bit about like what we've seen it already in the panel discussion. I think I mentioned this, that Bosch does quite many different applications, but I'm working for Bosch Research, which is kind of this central unit that in a way is of service or is of use to all of these business units, and so I can take topics in ROS that are maybe, for example, licensing, which is not super sexy, but super important, of course. And on the other hand, deliberation, which is probably a little bit sexy and also important. Behavior trees, right? Of course. And so, yeah, as I said, I basically wanted to present a little bit of progress in both of these topics. I split them up into the blue topic licensing and the red topic deliberation. And in the licensing, I first will talk about these kind of motivations, why we do this, or what the issue is, about special issues with the package XML, and in deliberation about our publicly funded project Convince, and about the working group, and then some tooling for behavior trees. So let me start with licensing. I put this picture here because when I started with this topic, and of course I'm no lawyer, but I guess I could say I'm quite interested in open source, because I always, since I started working at Fraunhofer, I was curious about open source software, and the first thing that kind of puzzled me with this topic was, what is a license even? And that's why I put this picture of a license plate. So a license is only something with literally some promise. It's literally an allowance to do something. In this case of the car, it is the allowance to use your car. You usually get this by paying a lot of money. And in case of software, this license is the allowance to use it for certain purposes. And for example, with GPL license, you're not allowed to use it for commercial purposes that easily. And so every license has kind of terms. And what we are interested in basically is that we not have some sort of license that we are not compatible with. I was also earlier speaking about using ROS in actual commercial end-user products, and there it may be even more crucial, because you then basically sell this whole product with its software to the customer. You notice in a lot of products you have these little menu items where there suddenly pop up some open source licenses. This is usually because this was in the terms of the license, and to comply with this license, the manufacturer had to put this menu item somewhere, because the license simply said you have to distribute the license text or something like that, and that's how he did it. So it comes with rules. And the thing is, we have to make sure that there's not some software in our product that has rules that we are not happy with. And this has happened in ROS-I in a very prominent example in the OpenCV3 package. There was very down there in the dependency tree this little library that's called libijbig. To be honest, I'm not even sure what it did there, and it wasn't very important, I can tell you that. But it was relatively bad because it has this GPL, GNU Public License, and it even says it in this text, in the documentation text of the package itself. So it would have been easy to find out, but no one did. This package, this whole OpenCV package, was licensed under, I don't even actually know, but this little license down there would have basically voided this license. It would have made it basically this kind of top-level license of the OpenCV would have kind of clashed with this license of this little tiny package down there, a little tiny library, what is not even clear what it does, where it's not even clear what it does. And so basically this is one of the motivation why we look into licensing, to not have products with weird, strange sub-dependencies. And for this one, we first thought that it is necessary to extend the package XML you can see on the left side, especially, for example, these cases of this tiny little library down in some, you may have this, right? You may have this license, and maybe the license is also good for you, but you still need to declare it. And in the current version of the package XML, all you could do is you could then add multiple license tags. It even says it in the documentation. But then the only thing you could do was add some comment. This license applies to this path, and another license applies to another path. And so we, or actually Ralph started this, and I've seen the approval by the TSC. We introduced this extension which adds this attribute called source files to the license tag, and now you could say source files, which kind of source files this license tag applies to, which is literally no change for packages of a single license, because those could just not use the tag, and if they only have a single license and this applies to all the packages, then there's no change required. The second change we made was also to introduce a type. Our first suggestion was to actually enforce this SPDX standard. SPDX is basically a standard that standardizes software bill of materials, but in this case all we are using is they also standardize the names for licenses. And so we first wanted to kind of make it mandatory for ROS packages to use this SPDX layer, but it was then decided to instead include another tag, another attribute that's called type, and so the default value would be not SPDX, the default value would be freeform, so that you can basically put anything there, because, I mean, theoretically in open source you are not forced to use any of these available open source licenses. You could just come up with your own one and call it behavior-tree.cpp license. And this is when you would use the freeform. And also maybe one thing that is interesting in this regard, if you look at all almost all ROS-I packages, then they have in this license tag, so basically between here and here, they have BSD there, which is fine. There's BSD license, but actually it's not, because BSD is a family of licenses. In terms of licensing, that's not so much of a big deal, because the license is still there. The license is still in the license text is in the package. And from this license text, you could infer that this is in fact BSD3 clause. But in order to make sure that this package XML is correct, we have to put there BSD3 clause, because BSD, as I said, could refer to multiple different licenses. And the most, according to Wikipedia, the most likely one it would refer to is even the BSD2 clause, which is not the one that was used in the ROS-I packages. And yeah, to conquer that, we introduced this type SPDX, because then it would be clear, because there's no type SPDX called just BSD, because it's simply ambiguous. And this would kind of conquer that as well. For this, I made a tool that's available under this link, Bosch Research ROS License Toolkit. And this, what it basically does, it uses a third-party tool that's called ScanCode Toolkit. This would literally scan through all the files in your repository, and it would give back anything that may hint at a license. It can find little text snippets that mention a license. It can also find headers, commonly used headers of licenses. It can also find full license texts, of course. And I use the output of this to just compare it to whatever is written in the package XML. And the idea is to use this as a linter, possibly even in some kind of CI job. If you have an open source repository that gets a lot of contributions, you can, if you put this in your CI job, you can make sure that no contributor will snag something in there that has a different license. And then for the, so basically, yeah, we see that there's even a license defined, which, yeah, can be already figured out by linting the package XML. And then we see that if there's also, you can have, as I said, you can have at most one license tag without a source files attribute. If you just have one license, this applies to all packages. For the SPDX standard, we currently agreed that we only make a warning. So especially if a maintainer says he has a license, maybe it is even already complying with the SPDX naming standard, then we can give a warning. Why don't you put the type SPDX there? Because it would be correct. And if it's not, we also give a warning. Then there's also the option to, there's also a attribute in the license tag that was there already, which is the license text. It's referring to kind of the license document that needs to be in your repository. And if you have more than one license, you also need to set this. So you need then to reference the file where each license is actually stated. If you only have one and there's only one license text, then it's again clear. And then maybe the most important check we do, is there any code in your repository that has a license that is not declared correctly in a license tag and matching source files attribute? Yeah, that's that. Maybe the second motivation is that all Debian packages require or should have by Debian standard a copyright file. If you look into your install user share doc folder, every actual Debian package that you installed from your Ubuntu sources will have one of these files. It will have a copyright file in there. Here you can, for example, see the one for Thunderbird, but it's the same for literally every package. But ROS packages that were created before a certain point had none of this. This means that kind of technically ROS packages don't really comply with this Debian standard. And on the other hand, it's also a great tool, because if you then want to scan code on your that you want to ship to a customer, you can literally just look through all the copyright files. Also, of course, of dependencies, because if you have dependencies that are Debian dependencies, then you can again rely on that they have this copyright file. And the copyright file, of course, contains copyright information, but also licensing information, just to be clear. Yeah, so the second idea, since the linter was already taking apart all of this, I decided to add this just as a feature. It's currently like experimental features under this branch that you can reach by this link. But it basically uses all of this available information from package XML, also license declarations that are in the source files, and also the available license text to compile a copyright file. And on the right, you can see one example that I created for the RCL-CPP package. That's just an example how one of these copyright files looks like. You can then see it will basically contain the name. I still have to figure out how to get this source, and it's not super strictly refined what should be in the source field. But what is strictly defined is, for example, this format. You then have, for example, files, and then it's basically a simplified glob type of string that you have to provide. And in this case, RCL-CPP is one of those packages that, of course, has not only one license. And so this basically applies to all files. And then this is a flat list of all of these copyrights. It could be, of course, beautified a little, but this way the translation between these files and the copyright files is also very clear. And then at the bottom it will have this license type, again in the XPDX standard, and then after this the text, which is simply copied from the license in the package. So the generation is not really inventing new data, it's just pulling it together from the right places. So generally, I need a bit of help, and ROS in general also needs you to take care about licensing. And with this whole project, I'm also looking for co-maintainer, someone that is interested in helping me out a little bit, especially the first thing of getting this into Bloom is still a lot of work, because the idea, of course, would be that Bloom on every release generates these copyright files and also maybe lints every package. And of course, even if you don't want to be co-maintainer, any contribution is welcome. And if you have a package or you are a maintainer of a package, then it would be very interesting if you could just run the linter. It should be documented well enough to be able to run it on your package. You can even run it on multiple packages at once. And I would be curious what the output is and whether you agree with this output. Maybe it will find something for you. I think I found already something in Move It when I ran it, and was already, I think I fixed it as well. So yeah, it was just a minor thing. Yeah, and with that we come to the second topic. The second topic is deliberation. Davide was already mentioning it in his talk. So in general, deliberation is this act of like people coming together and discussing something. The output of a deliberation would be some kind of an agreement. Of course, we are not really interested in people debating or whatever. We are, of course, interested in robotic deliberation. But it's still an important topic. And my interest or my involvement in this topic comes from this. European project, publicly funded project that's called Convince. I'm not quite sure still who we want to convince of what, but maybe but maybe some people of using behavior trees. No, I'm not. I don't know. But the general Convince project has these goals that look a bit like an ancient Greek temple. And what we are mostly talking about today would be the rightmost pillar, which is toolchain. This is also, as I see, a little bit my job in the project to, whatever we do in the project, in these terms of deliberation, to bring this also back a bit to the ROS community and making this actually usable. Because as you see, the second from the right pillar is this verification, which is super interesting, of course, but verification and bringing something that's could be called verification to an actual software developer in a robotic system is probably hard, right? I mean, to convince them to actually use these tools that you provide, that, as I said, is a little bit my job, I think. And we have a lot of interesting partners, many from Italy, also from France, and 3 different use cases, and we are actually providing the vacuum cleaner use case. This is a slide that Ralph presented. Again, what we think about deliberation, I think Davide also said it. Deliberation is a little bit this layer that would sit in a robotic system on top of the skill layer. So it would basically orchestrate the skills. There's the picture of the conductor that takes skills and puts them into good use. And there are many different technologies out there. And to kind of bring all of these technologies a little bit on the same page, at least in the ROS context, we decided to start the Deliberation Working Group. It's a community working group in the ROS ecosystem, and we meet once in a month, and the goal is to basically, first of all, to give a bit of an overview of the available ROS packages, and in a long and in a midterm also to maybe define a common interface between some of them. So, for example, the behavior tree itself is very well defined, but how you implement these different skills and different conditions and different actions that your behavior tree talks to is completely open and stuff like that. So, if you're interested, would be happy for a couple of more participants. Basically, you have to click this, go to this Google Groups to sign up, then you would receive all the invitations to the meeting. You can also have a look at our agenda or at the past recordings. The last meeting was actually last Monday when I was on the train to Paris, so there's not a super nice recording of it, but I will see what I can make of it. Yeah. Oh. I have also these... in the beginning, when I was trying to wrap my head around behavior trees, because that's what you do, right? In the beginning, we also had Michele, the first beginning author of Davide's library, in our consortium. And so I was really trying to wrap my head around this. And there are also like tons of different business units and tons of different people at Bosch using behavior trees for all sorts of projects. These could be developments with customers, these could be internal research projects. And we figured out that they could do with a couple more tools to actually analyze what happened to behavior trees, especially in the analysis of past runs. Keep in mind that this was before Davide announced the great new features of GRU 2. And but I think it's still valid because the idea is also to bring this whole behavior tree a little bit closer to ROS, because as Davide said, and I think that makes a lot of sense, it is fairly, the library as it is fairly ROS agnostic. And to bring a couple of these features closer into ROS, for example, just using the regular topics for logging could enable new use cases, and my idea is to release this open source soon and to do this before ROSCON, and then you would most likely reach it under this link down there, but not at the moment. Yeah, so just to show 2 use cases that what you could do with this library, and the idea is also that you could do your own analysis of past runs of behavior trees. So for example, on the left side, you can see the visualization of a behavior tree, and these little bars, these little colorful bars, basically indicate what the return states of each of these nodes were in this run. And so the idea is that if you, for example, run tests of your behavior tree, you could get a better insight what happened. Because, for example, in the live view, it's often hard to, on the right you can see the live view. The live view would just visualize the return states of the different nodes, but they would be happening so quickly that you maybe can't follow. So on the left side you can see more of a statistical view of these. But there are also other features in there, for example, analyzing the timing, which is something that we did also included in Crew 2. Yeah. So this is as I said, combined talk of two topics that I have been working on, but I would like to also give you a bit of an overview what other people at Bosch are working on in the ROS community. These are never like things that they probably worked on their own. These are usually things where they collaborate with other people, but I just thought it would be important if I want to represent Bosch in the ROS community to also give a bit of an overview of other things that may be interesting for you. So something we've heard already today is micro-ROS. My colleague Jan is contributing there a lot. In the middle you can see the ROS tracing tool. This is what Ingo Lütgebole has been working on, has been contributing to recently. That's basically the idea to get a bit of better insight of the runtime performance of your system. With these trace points you can basically measure time, measure execution time in real time of different sectors of your ROS code. And he was also the one that motivated this timing analysis in the BT tools, actually, because that's also important. On the very right side, you can see the Rocket Locator, which is actually a commercial product by Rexroth, so the same company that did this Control X platform that Dennis is using. And it's actually a commercial localization tool, and my colleague Stefan is doing the ROS bridge for that, because it is in itself also ROS agnostic, and with this ROS bridge you can use it as drop-in replacement to your other localizations. And then I have three more, which is first the FMI adapter. That's something that I didn't know about before I joined Bosch, but I would have loved to know about it, because FMI is actually a standard for exchangeable simulation plugins, and with this you can easily interface it with ROS. And so with these you can then, for example, use one of these FMI plugins with ROS. And this is also something that simulation is usually also something that's not very prone for like expandability and cross-compatibility, but even simulators from Siemens will support FMI. And with this you can also use it with ROS. In the middle, the Bosch engineering group offers industrial ROS trainings. So if you're interested in that, these are commercial trainings for ROS. You can send a link to send a message to the email below. And on the right side, it's me. I am now the maintainer of ROS Diagnostics, which is fun. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Christian. And now it's question time.
Sorry, the question is not directly with the main content of the talk, but with the last sentence. What about the RQT plugin for diagnostics for ROS2? I was just searching for it last week, that's why. Maybe there is something, but I missed.
Yeah, there is something. It's called Robot Monitor. Maybe that's the problem, and it's not it's not maintained by me. Yeah, okay. It's not part of this diagnostics repository. It's part of, I don't know, I think probably of RQT plugins or something.
But I was searching RQT diagnostics. Wasn't it diagnostics?
Yeah, but it's called Robot Monitor. That's the problem. Maybe.
Okay. No, that's good. Maybe there we need a meta package just to, point to it.
To be honest, that's happened, of course, long before my time. I don't know why it's split up this way.
Okay, but, thanks.
Regarding the license checks that you implemented, I have a couple of questions, basically. Maybe we can talk later a bit. But one question is, did you ever try to track down the dependency graph? Because from my point of view, this is also a quite important thing that if you have a ROS package that, of course, you have the obvious direct dependencies and you can check those, but usually you have a huge dependency graph and it might be interesting to look at the whole graph. I did something similar for ROS-I and it gets quite messy quite fast, and I wanted to see whether you have some experience with that.
That's not what I've been doing, but the idea is that if you do something like this, then at least this information in the package XML would be correct, right? Because otherwise you would have to scan every source of every dependency.
Which is what I
in
did.
the dependency graph. Yeah, exactly. So the idea is to simplify that, but not on a graph or on a dependency level, but only on a package level, so that at least the information in every package is correct. And I'm no expert again for legal stuff, but I would assume that if you could say that you rely on a license declaration in, for example, an Ubuntu package to be correct, and now you can also rely on, if this is implemented, you can also rely on a ROS package declaration to be correct.
Just a follow-up to that response what you gave. Isn't it against the example what you gave about that libj something, which was like very much down in the graph?
Yeah, but the scanner now would find this. This would I would treat this as an incorrect license declaration on side of OpenCV3.
But only if you really check the OpenCV package, right? If you depend on your package. If your package depends on OpenCV, you will check your package. But say it's two packages down, or the dependency graph. Going up the dependency graph. So you depend on the package that depends on OpenCV, so you might check the dependencies of your package that says, well, I'm fine, and I depend on OpenCV, which is, I don't know the license out of my head. But then you will not track this. And also, I'm not a lawyer, which is also why we didn't publish the tool that we wrote. But then you still would have a GPL licensed thing in your product, basically.
That's right. I mean, this example I found at the beginning would not be solved by this. That's true. This would only be solved by a dependency, like actually following the dependency graph. Yeah.
Thanks for your work on that. I haven't read the rep, but is the idea that the build farm would have an action that enforces SPDX specifications, so we don't get stuff like BSD instead of BSD2? In
an ideal world, yes, but in the rep we have agreed to make this, not mandatory.
Okay.
Maybe that's the next step. Yeah.
Cool.
I think we still have time to take one short question, if anyone have.
Also regarding licensing, is there a good automated way to check this in GitHub Actions or something?
Not yet, but
it's just for the build farm, because that would be convenient.
Yeah, I think it would make sense to also offer GitHub Action for
because the build farm is hard to debug.
Yeah,
I think everybody knows that. So
yeah, no, I think that was also the use case I mentioned. Like the linter, I think I should probably make some kind of GitHub Action for it, because then you can also, like, every pull request basically check whether someone introduced something.
Yeah, I will check. Maybe it's easy to add into pre-commit, and then it's easy to add into GitHub Action. Because it would be cool to check it on multiple levels.
Yeah.
Thanks.